What's up YouTube, Dale here from Zephyr, and today, quite like I've already done with the Hecahands from Phantom Revenge, I'm going to be doing a deep dive into the brand new art type that is, of course, the Hecahands. Now, the Hecahands, as you can see, got a very nice range of cards. Now, this is only the first wave of supports for these, the Hecahands, and of course the cool tunes, so there will be a lot more to come. Now, unlike with the Hecahands, which have a very direct way of playing and really do limit them to what they are able to play outside of it as non-engine, the Hecahands have a lot of flexibility. There's a couple of different options that you can play with the deck. You can just decide to play it pure. You can go down a Chimera Illusion route. You could consider branded fusion or a branded esque option. You could even consider my personal favorite right now being the Horus package, and you have the Kashtira options, because that can really open up the door whether you are needing protection from certain activations, whether you are looking to speed up your access to your rank 6 plays, if your rank 7 plays. There's so many different options right now that I think the creativity behind the Hecahands is really, really impressive. So as you can see, it got 4 ultra rares, so one of them being the fusion monster, one of the hidden Hecahands, and then Yugioh and Ibtel. Now, Yugioh and Ibtel, usually you can play them about 1 if you're not playing a pure version. If you're playing more of a pure version, you'll play more of the Ibtel. That is the most important one that I'll talk about a little bit later on. You've then got the hidden Hecahands. You're going to want to be maxing this out, as this is technically your rotor of the deck. And then your Yugioh is you can play it at 1 or 2. It really is entirely up to you. Now, I'm going to go deeper into each of these card effects. We'll start off with the monsters, then we'll work our way into the spells and traps, and then the fusions. And then I'll also talk about some support cards you might be able to utilize if you want to be playing the deck, and what the deck really wants to try and achieve to do. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell, and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. I do plan to do this for the cool tunes as well, as I'm having a lot of fun with all 3 of the decks from Phantom Revenge. Yes, of course, they're not on the same level as the previous ones, because how are you going to be able to top Yummy, K9, and Dracotail? Well, keep in mind, with deck building sets like this, all it takes is one incredibly powerful support card, and the entire engines and cores go crazy. So make sure you pick one that you are really liking the idea of, and that's what I want to be doing with these breakdown videos, is give you as much information as possible so you can kind of go, that is a deck that I like to play, and get ahead of the curve. So we're just going to move the spells, the monsters, and the traps out of the way from the extra deck, and we're going to look into the main monsters of the set. So starting off with your Ibtel. As I've mentioned, Ibtel is like your best card for this entire option, and there will be a card being the Illusion Apprentice that you might want to be, or Nightmare Apprentice, apologies, that I'll talk about a little bit later on, which is going to be able to get you direct access to these cards, because as you can see, they are all illusions, which is really important, and they all share what I thought was supposed to be the illusion trait, in the fact that if it battles a monster, neither could be destroyed by that battle. So that's all 5 of these monsters have that clause in play. So what makes the Ibtel so good? So the Ibtel, if this card battles a monster, neither could be destroyed by that battle, but you can only use each of the following effects once per turn. You reveal this card in the hand, shuffle it back into the deck, and then special summon any Hekahand monster from the deck in defense position except itself. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you get to target a Hekahand monster in the grave and accept itself and special summon it. So what does that mean? Well, that gets you direct access to either your Gygas, your Godos, or your Beerus. Now, all of these cards have effects on the field. Godos is the most interactive one during your opponent's turn, and I'll talk about that in a short second. But with Beerus and your Gygas, these cards are the ones that during your turn let you interact with your opponent. Now, what the Hecahands want to try and achieve is they want to try and get control of your opponent's monsters, whether that be taking it from the hand, whether it be taking it from the top of the deck, or whether you just be playing cards like Change of Heart to just take control of it from the field. So when you're trying to get access to your Beerus or your Gygas, these cards have the following effects: that during the main phase, you get the ability to excavate the top 3 cards of your opponent's deck in the form of the Gygas, and then if you reveal a monster, you get to special summon an excavated monster to the field, and then you shuffle the rest into the deck. The Beerus lets you look at one random card in your opponent's hand, and if it is a monster, you summon it to your side of the field. So a lot of your Hekahand fusion monsters that we'll get onto a little bit later on do say that they can be fusion summoned using your Hekahand monster and then one monster that is owned by your opponent, and sometimes in scenarios, a monster that is owned by your opponent can also be treated as a Hekahand monster. This is actually really important if you do want to go down the vampire option, because with the vampire option, you have Dampier the Vampire Sheridan, and you also had, of course, the classic zombie vampire, and both allow you to use monsters that are originally your opponent's as the required levels that are needed. So you can take any level monster from your opponent and then use it as a level 8 or a level 6, depending on which one you want to go for. On top of that, all three of the lower ones, the Hekahand, Godos, Gygus, and Beerus, all have the same effect that if your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, you can summon them from the hand, which is really, really important, especially when we look at Godos, because Godos has the effect that during your opponent's turn, specifically during their main phase, you get a quick effect to target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it, but you banish it when it leaves the field. It's actually really important because not only do you get to take away one of your opponent's recurring pieces, but if you do excavate cards from your opponent's deck with the zombie vampire, you can also get a 2-for-1, being able to bring one of them back turn 0 or disrupt during your opponent's turn. So that's the Ibtel and what it kind of ideally wants to aim for with your Godos, your Gygus, and your Beerus. But then the other ultra rare being the Hecahands Yadel is something that's going to be less effective, which is why you don't currently need to be playing it at more than one in most versions of the build. Why is that? Well, let's take a look at the effect. So it shares the exact same effect that it can't be destroyed by battle of a monster, and neither can that monster that battles it. You only get to use each of the following effects once per turn. You reveal it in your hand, quite like the Ibtel, shuffle it back into the deck, but then add a Hekahand spell or trap from the deck to the hand. If it's sent to the graveyard, you target a Hekahand spell or trap in your grave and set it. Now, the spells and traps that you can add, I'll go over in a bit more depth a little bit later on, but in short, you're going to be going for a quick play, either return of a spell and trap or a fusion summon, or you'll be going for one of the two counter trap cards, one of them being able to counter spells and one of them being able to counter monsters, or you can go for what is probably going to be the more common one, being the Hecahands, because that is going to allow you to search out any of your other Hekahand monsters. But in an ideal scenario, you really don't want to be starting off with a Yadel, you want to start off with the Ibtel, as that's going to be your one card combo to build everything up and then get you into your Jazar, and the Jazar will then work you into the Hekahand spell or trap depending on what you want to try and achieve. Speaking of the Hekahand spells and traps, let's take a look at them now. So for the Hekahand spells, we got two, one of them being an ultra in the hidden Hecahands. So this card is when you activate it, you can also send one other card you control to the graveyard. You add a Hekahand monster from the deck to the hand, and if you send another card to the graveyard to activate this effect, you get to set a Hekahand spell or trap from the deck, except itself. So that will give you direct access to your Yadal or your Ibal, or of course your Tartarus. And I absolutely love the name Tartarus. It just reminds me of like God of War, Greek mythology, and everything else in between. I'll talk about that in a second, as there is also a secondary effect of the Hecahands. So as I mentioned previously with the Gygus, the Godos, and of course the Beerus, the ability of the hidden Hecahands from the graveyard lets you banish it, your opponent draws a card, and then they discard a card. So straight away, if your opponent is not adding cards, you're going to make sure they do, so you can start getting your bigger boss monsters down to the field of play. Then if we take a look at the Hekahand Tartarus, it is a quick play spell card, and you get to activate one of these effects. You can only use each effect once per turn. If you control a Hekahand monster, you get to target a spell or trap your opponent controls and return it to the hand. Or fusion summon a Hekahand fusion monster from your extra deck by banishing its materials from the field and or grave. If you use a face-up monster you control that is owned by your opponent as material, it can be treated as a Hekahand monster. Now, this is going to be most important for one of your Hekahand fusion monsters, being the Hecahands Xeno, that I'll talk about in a short second, but this one specifically requires 3 Hekahand monsters, but it can be very, very devastating for your opponent if you do get this into the field of play. So for the trap cards, as you can see, we've got 2 counter trap cards on both of these. One of them being the Yadal Hekahand. So is when your opponent activates a spell or trap card, while you control a Hekahand monster, negate the activation, and if you do, destroy that card. And then you can set the destroyed spell or trap to your field. On the other side of that, your Yugioh allows you, when your opponent activates a monster effect, while you control a Hekahand, negate the activation. If you do, destroy it, and then you can special summon the destroyed monster to your field. Both very, very powerful cards. Obviously, there are downsides to it because you have to control Hecahands. So if your opponent gets rid of your Hekahand monsters and you don't have another way to get to another one, you're going to be in a little bit of trouble, as these cards are going to do nada. These are also cards you don't really want to be seeing in your hand, as you do search them out throughout your plays, but it sometimes can be one of the ones that if you get hit with Draw and Lockbird to set these cards face down, you'll still get a bit more advantage from them. Now let's talk about the last 2 cards in the Hekahand archetype as it currently stands, being the 2 fusion monsters. So we've got the 1 ultra rare in the Jar, and then we've got the 1 super rare in the Xeno. Now keep in mind the Tartarus, the Yadal, the Ibal, and of course the Godos, Godox, and Beerus can all be upgraded to super rares if you do really, really like them, and they're actually incredibly cheap. So let's talk about the more common fusion monster you're going to be going into, being your Jazar. So Jazar requires 1 Hekahand monster and an illusion monster. Very easily done because you also have multiple ways to summon this. What does that mean? Well, it must first be either fusioned or specialed from the extra deck by tributing 2 monsters you control, 1 face-up monster owned by your opponent and an illusion monster. If it battles a monster, neither could be destroyed by that battle. And during your main phase, you get to add a Hekahand card from your deck or graveyard back to the hand. So this is actually really important to help you recycle your counter trap cards, because when you do enter the grind state of the game, you want to make sure you can get these back into rotation and make it really, really awkward for your opponent to try and pick through, especially if you try and bring it down to a simplified game state. After it's pretty much done its search, it's kind of then a little bit, not irrelevant, but less effective. And the one big thing about this, which really does help you bridge with the Horus package, is it is a level 8, and that can help you work your way into Zombie Vampire as well. Now let's take a look at Xeno. So Xeno requires specifically 3 Hekahand monsters. It does not have an alternative summoning condition like the Jazar, but it is relatively easy to get if you do choose to play the Tartarus. If it battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. You can only use each of the following effects once per turn. During the main phase, quick effect, look at up to 2 random face-down cards in your opponent's extra deck. Then you get to special summon one of them to your field. If this card is fusion summoned and card you own is controlled and destroyed by your opponent's card, you get to take control of any number of monsters your opponent controls. Non-target and just kind of, you've got rid of it, I'm going to steal all of your opponent's monsters. But the fact of the matter is, during your opponent's main phase, or even your phase as well, you get to look at your opponent's extra deck of 2 random cards, and you could take away a very core piece of it, but then also summon it to your field. So if you're able to summon a card like Cypher Lord Omega, for example, or if you're able to summon a card like SP Little Knight, you'll still be able to use their effects on the field, and you can really, really disrupt your opponent. Just remember that they are special summoned, not correctly summoned, so if they do leave the field of play, they won't be able to be revived from the graveyard, for example, with something like a Monstery Bomb. So that's it for all of the Hekahand cards in Phantom Revenge. Now let's talk about some supporting sub-engines or supporting decks that you might want to be putting Hecahands with all together. So let's take a look at some of the cards that were reprinted in Phantom's Revenge that can really help the Hekahand strategy. Eye of Illusion, Snatch Steal, and Change of Heart. You can also consider other cards like your Crackdown that takes control of one of your opponent's monsters, but you can also consider to look at stuff like Mind Control and anything else in between. As long as you're able to take control of one of your opponent's monsters, we all know how disruptive they can be, and that's where Eye of Illusion can really come into its own. Because, unlike Crackdown, which is a trap card, the Eye of Illusion being a quick play spell card means it can be utilized during your turn and your opponent's if you are able to get the correct setup. So what is the correct setup for Eye of Illusion? Very simply, as long as you control an illusion or a spellcaster monster, you get to activate one of the following effects. Your illusion and spellcaster monsters cannot be destroyed by battle this turn. During your opponent's turn, target one face-up monster your opponent controls and take control of it until the end phase. When your opponent monster declares an attack, target one face-up monster your opponent controls, except the attacking monster, and that attack target is then performed to damage calculations, so you get to redirect some of your attacks. Snatch Steal and Change of Heart. Snatch Steal is obviously the equipped card that allows you to take one of your opponent's monsters, but then during each standby phase, you will give your opponent 1,000 life points. And then Change of Heart, you target a monster your opponent controls, take control of it until the end phase. Chances are when you're activating cards like this, you're taking control of them, not to leave them on the field of play. You're probably going to get rid of them very easily by going into your Hekahand fusion monsters. So another supporting element that you can kind of consider. Now, I've already mentioned stuff like being able to play the Horus package. This is something that's a little bit more unique. The only real overlay bridge that it has is direct access to the Zombie Vampire. But if you want the biggest bridge around, and this is a card you could play in a Chimera Illusion deck, or you can just play in any version of the Hecahands you want, and you can actually get it extra shiny if you move fast enough, is the Nightmare Apprentice. So the Nightmare Apprentice fits absolutely perfectly in the Chimera Illusion deck if you wanted to consider it, because this one allows you to special summon this card from the hand by discarding a card. You can only special summon it once per turn this way, and if this card battles a monster, neither can be destroyed by that battle. If this card is normal or special, you get to add an illusion monster from the deck to the hand except itself. So straight away you get access to your Ibel or of course your Ibtel, depending on which one you want to try and get access to. More times than not, as I've already mentioned, you're going to want to work your way into your Ibtel, as this will then let you work into an easier way to summon out your Gygus, your Godos, or your Beerus. So you're getting a lot of different access for it. Now, why it works so well in the Illusion build is because it then opens up the door for like Gazelle, and Gazelle can also search out your Illusion monsters as well. So you just have a little bit more synergy. It opens up the door a bit more to the Fiendsmith package. It can also work its way into the extra deck a little bit more. Overall, I feel like the Chimera Illusion Hekahand build is probably one of the better ones. I feel Cash Turrets is another option for you on that one, but because the whole Hecahands portion don't rely on a normal summon or anything like that, you could play something like the Canine package if you really wanted to. You could play something that I quite like to play in a Horus package that I'm testing out right now, is the Quackimiru Guardian, for the pure fact that I can normal summon it and I don't need to worry about Draw Unlock Bird, or a Molchome if my opponent has held it long enough, or an Ash Blossom that might stop my search off of the back of the Nightmare Apprentice. There's a lot of flexibility in this deck, which is what I absolutely love. As I've already mentioned, you've got the Zombie Vampire and Dampier Sheridan, which could be really, really fun cards to utilize. More so the Vampire than the actual Dampier, for the pure fact that Dampier is a little bit more aggressive, but can still be a very, very cool tech option should you want to consider it for a build like this. So that's kind of it for the breakdown of the Hecahands. Of course, a lot of you will be putting in the comments loads of other different options and kind of creativity that you've put together for the Hekahand build. I really do like the idea behind it. I think it's got a lot of flexibility, a lot of creative options, and it really comes down to the type of playstyle you want to go with and what kind of build you want to be looking at. I think it's a really fun art type, and I don't think it's that far off when getting some new support that could really take it up a decent couple of notches, because like I said, it still has space for a normal summon. It has space for more fusion monsters. Heck, even has more space for different illusion monsters or more of the Ibtel or Abtel kind of cards to give them a bit more of a push. So that's it for the entire deep deck breakdown, there we go, of the Hecahands. If you want to be seeing more of the Hecahands, then make sure you get the video above 50 likes. I'm going to be looking to bring you a profile update and then some either combos or test stand videos, depending on what version of the profile I tend to show you. I try to avoid ones that are already out online. I want it to be a little bit more unique than rinse and repeat. I know that Chimera Illusion, as I've already mentioned, is probably the better version, but I'm probably going to bring you my version that I'm having a lot of fun playing with, and then kind of give you your options to update it should you want to. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, share. Stick around because I will be doing a cool tune version of this as well, so you have as much information as possible. I know it's already out in Europe. However, next week is when it gets released in America. So hopefully that'll give you a bit more of an understanding of exactly what you want to target when that set does come out. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe and of course, happy dueling.